I'm Will Aubrey. It's time for another edition of the Improbability Engine. My buddy Joe Darnold joins me here. And Joe, time for our moment of what?
All right, well, let's start off in Major League Baseball, where a new rule looks to be coming into fruition that is getting rid of the intentional walk. Now, it's not getting rid of the actual walk, it's just getting rid of the 4 pitches outside where the catcher stands up and puts his hand out and they do 4 pitches that way. And the reason they're doing this is they're trying to speed up the game. The problem is, I have to admit, that's one of my more favorite plays in baseball because it's something you don't practice a lot of, and anything could happen. I've seen wild pitches on intentional walks. There have even been, times when someone hit the ball during an intentional walk. They're taking one of the variables out of the game, and while, yes, it will speed up the game, I think it might actually hurt the game in the long run.
Well, I don't think it speeds the game up appreciably. How many intentional walks do you have in a game? 2 or 3? I mean, it's not like it's going to make that much difference. And they've proposed another rule that is even more insane. Have you heard about their extra innings idea?
Yeah, it's going to be more like softball where they put a runner on second or something of that nature.
It's insane. The problem isn't extra inning games. And if you want to speed the game up, just make players stay in the batter's box. Make pitchers stay on the rubber.
Here's the issue with the idea of speeding the game up. Speeding the game up doesn't really do anything. It's still going to be a slow game. At its fastest, baseball's a slow game.
That's right.
Just by its nature. And you can look no further than one of its distant cousins in cricket. Now, cricket's a game that they go into it knowing that it's going to take 3 days to finish this game of cricket. And I'm here to tell you, when I went to Jamaica, the one time I've been to Jamaica, it was the West Indies versus, I want to say, Bangladesh in Test cricket. The whole place shut down while they played. And then they quit, and they said, all right, we'll be back tomorrow for day 2 of Test cricket. It's one of those where you go, are you kidding me? And the runs were ridiculous. So it wasn't a matter of, hey, we've got to score a lot of runs or we got to do a lot of this. I think what it is that the game is dying because it's just dying. It's one of those things. I love baseball. I played baseball as a kid, and I'll still watch baseball, but it is a sedentary game. It's a game where you go and you sit and you have a beer and a hot dog, and that's it.
Well, there's definitely truth there. I call it a radio game because to me, it was always a sport that I would rather listen to on the radio than watch, because you could listen to a baseball game on the radio and do 6 other things at the same time.
Well, and one of the things that I loved about that, just to play off that point, is there were so many colorful announcers in baseball radio, just in my life. I mean, Mike Shannon and Harry Carey, guys like that where you go through and you go, hey, it doesn't even matter what it is. I mean, it's just fun to listen to them talk.
I'll always remember Mike Shannon saying, he wouldn't walk the pitcher, would he?
Especially when the pitcher's having control issues and he's like, I don't know, maybe. No, I used to love those guys, and that's part of the draw, I think. The more you get away from that and the more you get away from the regional
but attendance is still strong. Where they're hurting is TV viewers.
And it's one of those where it's hitting their bottom line. One of the things that makes soccer, and I know you don't like soccer, Will, one of the things that makes soccer so viable in the United States is they're not building gigantic cathedrals. They're building 15,000 seat stadiums. They're filling them up fairly regularly. But they're able to sell American soccer overseas. They've recently signed a $1 billion, MLS has a $1 billion global television package to broadcast rights outside of the United States. Now, we can talk about, well, soccer's never going to have 100,000 people regularly the way that football does. And that's probably true. And they probably won't ever get to 55,000 every day that baseball has. But what you're seeing is that there is enough outside money coming in, that the MLS and soccer in the United States will be very viable and popular with only 25,000 people in the stands.
Well, soccer is definitely increasing in popularity, and soccer is responsible in part for the demise of baseball because kids are playing soccer instead of baseball. And that, I've read an article here maybe a year ago that pointed out that there are half as many people playing Little League Baseball as played like 10 years ago. And soccer's clearly, at least in part, responsible for that. They're playing soccer instead. Now, I would argue that that's not good for them because soccer doesn't teach hand-eye coordination. And, there's this hilarious video on YouTube where a guy's talking about how soccer's going to be the demise of the country because people will invade and we won't be able to use our hands.
The problem is, who's invading? People who can't use their hands. If it's really that big of a threat, then what are we worried about? No, it's definitely something there. I think the biggest draw, as we finish up on this topic of soccer and baseball, you're going to see a greater push for the democratization of sports. And soccer is the ultimate poor game. You can play soccer anywhere, and really you just need something that you don't mind kicking.
Well, that's true.
That could be a can, it could be a ball, it could be, you could play on a street, on a field, it doesn't matter. It's the ultimate poor game. Whereas baseball, in order to play baseball, it seems like you have to have a glove and a bat and a ball and a field.
In The Man Who Would Be King, it's a guy's skull in a sack.
I mean, that would be scary more than anything. But yeah, the concept's pretty much the same.
My moment of why.
Go for it.
I was watching a little documentary on one of the ESPN channels this week about the Fab Five at Michigan.
Yeah.
And for people who are not old enough to remember, Michigan had a great team of 5 freshmen who then became sophomores, etc., back in the 90s. And they called them the Fab Five. And they lost to North Carolina in the NCAA tournament final.
George Lynch was on that North Carolina team. He was their star player. Very good North Carolina team.
Chris Webber calls a timeout when they have no timeouts left.
Yeah.
Now, here's what's interesting that I had forgotten. They inbound the ball to Webber, okay? And he's bringing it down the floor. The first thing that happens is he looks like he's going to call timeout immediately as soon as they inbound it to him. Because if you watch it in slow motion, you can see his hands on the ball, but it's like he's ready to make the timeout signal, and then he doesn't. The indecision caused him to walk.
Right.
He takes 2 steps.
Oh, they missed a travel. I remember watching that game. Yeah.
He takes 2 steps before dribbling the basketball, and then he comes down and dribbles to the corner, which players instinctively do, and it's the worst thing you can possibly do. And then he calls timeout.
Well, the things to remember here is in that game, Webber's a power forward. Why are you throwing the ball to Chris Webber?
Good question.
Tip of the cap to Dean Smith, who calls the press on that one, a trapping press, a 3/4 court at least. I don't think it was a full court, but I think it was a 3/4 court. They did exactly what Dean Smith wanted. Just goes to show you how astute a student of the game Dean Smith was. Fantastic coach. And then you got to give him credit for the execution. I mean, it is you give North Carolina all the credit in the world. You can say that Chris Webber lost Michigan the national championship. That's not the case. North Carolina went out there and took it. They forced him into a decision-making point that he was not comfortable, and he made a wrong decision. It happens. It happens. It's part of the game. It's what you try to do as defense.
Now, clearly, Webber has had trouble dealing with it even over the years.
Even when
because
he was a superstar in the NBA.
He refused to be a part of the documentary.
Yeah.
He didn't want to answer questions after the game, although he did. He went into the press conference and he answered questions, but he was clearly disturbed, and it had a negative effect on him, and it's easy to understand why. I mean, who in that situation wouldn't react that way? it wasn't that he screwed up and it arguably cost his team the national championship with nobody watching. He did it with 35 million people watching.
Well, and what's more is that he really was he had ascended to an icon status in a very short amount of time. And there was a lot going on in that was traditionalist versus the new wave. You could even go as far as questioning whether some of the criticism that the Fab Five received was race-based. I won't make assertions to that.
And Jalen Rose
thinks that's the case. But it's one of those where you look at it and you go, I don't know. It's one of those where I think it was an amplified thing. I think a lot of the things that happened in that game could have happened to anybody. I mean, it really could have. But bringing it back around to people famous for their mistakes. In baseball in 1908, there was a rookie named Fred Merkle. Now, Fred Merkle played for the Cubs. No, he was for the Giants against the Cubs. Okay. And I'm going to read some of this off. That way I'm getting it right. Merkel's failure to advance to second base on what should have been a game-winning hit led instead to a force out at second and a tied game. The Cubs later won the makeup game, which proved decisive as they beat the Giants by 1 game to win the National League pennant in 1908, in what has been described the most controversial game in baseball history. Now, Fred Merkle, rookie player for the Giants in 1908, is forever immortalized by this base running gaffe that they called Merkel's boner. It was the worst mistake that ever happened, to hear some people talk about it. Now, since the time that it has passed, there have been other gaffes. Jose Canseco, the home run ball bouncing off his head over the wall. It just happens sometimes. The Randy Johnson throwing the ball and it hitting a bird. Things happen. I mean, that's why we like sports. Things happen. But I think it's negative and bad whenever you judge a player forever by the one mistake they made.
Have you seen the old Gatorade commercial where the girl climbs the wall?
Yes.
The ball girl climbs the wall?
Yes.
The first time my wife saw that, she thought it was real. And she says, "See, girls can play ball."
You know what? The first time I saw those, I was like, what? Why have I not seen this before? It just goes to show you. I guess it's the era of fake news taking over, huh?
Let's talk about Racer basketball. And wow, I mean, Saturday was... It was humbling, it was troubling, it was disturbing, it was all kinds of things, and none of them were good.
I think it was bad.
Yeah.
I'm say it's bad.
I mean, they got blown out on their home floor by Eastern Illinois, and let's be clear, this is a bad Eastern Illinois team. They were 5-9 in the conference coming in. It's not like the Eastern Illinois team that blew Murray State out when Devester Anderson was here, that had Kyle Hill and Henry Domercant. This is a bad team by any reasonable measure.
I will throw this out there. I think that when comparing the types of team makeup on roster, Eastern Illinois is the closest to what Murray State has. And that is, they are dominated by one subgroup of players, and they have no depth elsewhere to do anything else. Now, what that means is you get a high beta team. They're a team that can win games they probably shouldn't. Games like Missouri, they beat Missouri. They probably shouldn't have. They certainly shouldn't have beat, on a talent question, they shouldn't have beat Murray State at home on senior night. That should not have happened.
And the Racers, to be clear, in my opinion, quit down the stretch in that game.
I think that was the case as well. And really the thing that comes out of that is less the loss. I mean, the loss hurt. It sucks to lose. It sucks to lose at home. It sucks to lose on senior night. It sucks to get blown out at home on senior night against a team you thought you should beat. But the most distressing and damaging portion of that is the loss of DeMarcus Croker for the rest of the season. He only played, 3 minutes and left the game with a broken bone in his foot, is out for the rest of the season. The senior who he's never really been the prolific scorer or the dynamic player that his high school rating or the hype that had him coming in had kind of done. But this is a guy who was a double-digit scorer this year, third leading scorer on the team, leading rebounder on a team that doesn't rebound. Right? I mean, this is what we're looking at. And to lose him now, the thing that made him so good.
I actually think he's the fourth leading scorer.
You think he is? I thought he was ahead of Jones.
It's
Either
conceivable that I'm wrong.
It's conceivable that I'm wrong as well. So I expect some people to check us on that. But you're losing this guy, and say what you want about him, on what your perceptions and what your preconceived notions of him were and how he's measured up since. He was a vital part of this team's success. When they won games and played well, it was because he played a part in those games and played well as well. So the loss of him is going to be tough.
Obviously, I feel bad for DeMarcus.
Oh, God. I can't even imagine that. I mean, this is a young man who went to Texas, had committed to Murray State, then went to Texas. The situation wasn't what he had expected at Texas. Transferred back to Murray State, lost a semester in that transfer. Comes to Murray State in a time whenever there's a lot of movement and a lot of things are changing and happening that are different. But has always been, he's as personable as any player. He's nice. He talks to fans. He loves the fans. A guy that, quite honestly, might be one of the greatest athletes to ever play at Murray State.
He's a tremendous athlete.
Oh, my God. Some of the stuff he does in the air is just ridiculous.
Now, the Racers have to bounce back, though.
Oh, yeah.
They have to bounce back from the loss of Croker. They have to bounce back from the loss at home to Eastern Illinois. They have 2 games left. They play at SEMO tomorrow. And then on Saturday, they play at UT Martin. They have to win both of those games if they're going to have a winning season, unless you want to posit a situation where they win a couple of games in the OVC tournament. And that's possible. Let's be clear. Yeah. They could win out because, after all, we're not talking about the ACC or the Big Ten. This is the OVC, and the teams are relatively closely bunched.
Yeah, here's the thing that really sums it up to me. There is a scenario that is controlled by Murray State where Murray State could finish first in the West.
Yes.
There is a scenario that is a bit more convoluted that could see them not make the OVC tournament.
Right.
Still, to this day.
Yes.
2 games left. That's as high a beta as you can get, because you can go from having a bye into the semifinals, the number 2 overall seed, not play until you get way down into the tournament, and you're playing a team that's you've got all the benefits of that, or you could be at home. I don't know if I've ever seen that before. But you're right. This team they've got no more time to mess around. They've got to win these next 2 games.
Now, SEMO beat Murray State by 1 here at the CFSB Center.
In a meltdown.
Yes.
Racers had the halftime lead and ended up losing.
It was a game I never thought they were going to lose.
I didn't either. No, in the first half they had a 9-point lead, 10-point lead.
Something like that.
And then they end up losing by 1, 75-74, and just tough. And make no mistake, this SEMO team's talented. Rick Ray's done a great job since he's been there. They're still not to the point where you would count them as a contender for the OVC crown every year. Although this year they've got a puncher's chance. I mean, you got to think whoever
they've
gets
got
the
every
2
bit
seed
as
in
good
the
a
West.
chance as Austin Peay had last year.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, really, because you look at who they had in the game against Murray State. They were led by Mahoney, 23 points, 5 rebounds. Kellum had 12 points, 5 rebounds, and Cleveland, arguably their best player, had 12 points and 11 rebounds. This is a team that's got talent. And going to play at the Show Me Center is not easy. Good teams lose there.
Having said that,
Yeah,
the racers usually win there.
they have.
Historically, they usually win there. And in fact, there was a time when racer fans called it Racer Arena West.
Yeah, that's true. And what's funny about it, I was at the game a couple years ago, Cam's sophomore year, the last year for Steve Prohm, where going into that game, they had a chance to clinch the OVC and get the NIT bid. All they had to do was go to SEMO, which was horrifically underperforming, although they had some talent. With Nino Johnson down low, and I mean, they had talent, but they just didn't do anything that year. And I watched SEMO run out to a huge lead, and at one point in the second half, I remember leaning over to my wife and telling her, "Honey, I don't think they're going to be able to come back from this. You know, let's think about heading to the car. You know, it's a long drive back. It's going to suck. You know, and I don't really like them watching them lose." And she's like, "No, hold on for a minute." And boy, was she right. Because in the last few minutes of that game, you watch the racers come back. They fought, they clawed. SEMO made some really boneheaded mistakes, and the game went to overtime. Cameron Payne fouls out. I thought it was over at that point, and then TJ Sapp has a great game. Wayne Langston comes in and has a good game at the very tail end, at the death. Tyler Rambo makes a couple big plays, and the racers somehow come out with the win, and they're able to clinch the NIT, and that year they went all the way to Old Dominion. So, I mean,
to win, I think Murray State, and this is true of both of these games, okay?
Absolutely.
They're going to have to play defense, and that's something they do not do on a consistent basis. There are too many games where they give up wide open layup after wide open layup, and they don't close out on threes. And you can't get away with that. The game the other night against Eastern Illinois, I started charting at the beginning of the game how many unchallenged shots and how many challenged shots Eastern Illinois was getting. I quit in the first half. 2/3 of the shots they got in the first half were unchallenged. And there's just no excuse for that. We've seen that when they put their mind to it, they're capable of playing good defense.
Yeah.
They just don't do that on a consistent basis.
Nope, you're absolutely right. And consistency is the problem this team has had all year. But the one thing I'll say is this team's fragile. They're fragile. They don't have the depth of talent at the positions needed to be highly successful. They just haven't. You look at what they've got: 2 scorers, and they've had a couple guys who've been able to step up and play supporting roles, but they just don't have any depth. And we've talked about it before. Whenever we talk about foul trouble, the biggest issue isn't that they're getting fouls, but it's that if Miller goes out, there's no post presence to score. If Starks goes out, there's no perimeter player who can step up and be a leader in scoring. And that's just not good enough. You're looking at a team you talk about options to win and options to lose. This is a team that has very few options to win and a plethora of options to lose.
Now, I talked to Coach McMahon the other day, and he said that they were going to have to adjust the way they play without Croker. That
Agreed.
they're going to have to play slower, which I find that interesting. We'll see how that plays out. They haven't played that way all year. I'm not sure you can make that change on a dime and be successful this late in the season.
It all comes down to execution.
Well, and as far as execution goes, if you look at the way they play,
Right.
they generally, at least often, bring it down and make 1 or 2 passes, and then somebody makes a one-on-one move and takes a shot.
Right.
They don't generally get a high percentage of their baskets off of assists. And maybe if they slow down, that will lead to more assists and easier shots.
Right. Well, when Croker was in, I lost track of how many times I watched Croker jump a pass and end up flushing it on the other end. I mean, that's part of his game. Was he would play in the passing lanes, and those guys are very valuable. But what you've got to have there is you've got to have the ability for that guy to play off your man to help in the post, but step out to play on the outside. And they hadn't had that very consistently so far.
Let's talk about Callaway County sports.
All right, let's start with the girls.
Wow. The Callaway girls, they played a fabulous game for 2.5 quarters last night. They led Marshall County, and they had a 6-point lead at one time, and they had the ball with a chance to go up 8 or 9.
Yep.
And it just got away from them in the fourth quarter. But the girls improved so much over last year and so much from where they were at the beginning of the season.
Agreed.
Alicia Hornbuckle, by the end of the year, was one of the best players in the region.
Without question.
She was amazing. In the game,
And it wasn't a surprise. You knew she was going to be good. Teams game planned to stop her, and she still was
Right.
able to take over games.
in the game last night, J.C. Spann for 3 quarters. Now, she had help because they were doubling
Langy down low.
They were doubling Hannah Lange, but J.C. Spann just fought and fought and fought and gave Lange fits, and she was ripping rebounds away. She played so hard. I was so proud of her. Megan Greer, she played extremely hard too, and she wound up with 11 points in the game last night. I think Alicia had 25, something like that, and that they all just... They gave it everything they had. I'm really proud of them. I'm proud of Coach Waller. I think she did a tremendous job coaching that team this year.
Agreed. And I'll say this, and I might catch a little grief from it, but I truly believe that the 4th district had 3 of the best teams in the 1st region.
Oh, I agree completely.
I don't think, I mean...
You could even argue they were the 3 best.
You can look at the records and see how that played out. I mean, you want to talk about Murray, Marshall, and Callaway this year, that's a murderer's row. Playing those games was, I mean, that's a tough a matchup as you can have any given night. Any team in the 1st region goes up against those teams, and you'll be lucky to come out with a victory ever against those 3. And that's that's a testament to how good these Lakers were, how well they played, how hard they fought, and how they progressed as a team throughout the season, because this is a team that nobody really knew what we had when we came into it. I mean, we thought we were going to be better. We're like, oh yeah, the Lady Lakers are going to be good. They've got chemistry. They've got talent. They've got some pieces that can do well. They might do something. And lo and behold, they impressed me every time they took the floor. And I hope those girls keep their heads up, because I am proud as heck of them and the effort they put forth this season.
I am too, and it really touched me and my wife during the boys' game. J.C. Spann and Megan Greer came up, and they gave us each a hug. And it meant the world to the 2 of us. We love those kids. We love all of the Lady Lakers. And they're like adopted granddaughters to us. And it just, if they had pulled it out, I'm sure I would have been crying if they had pulled it out and gotten the victory last night. And I want to mention, because I want to make sure I mention everybody, Allie Fritz had a great year for Callaway this year. I do not want to leave her out, as she just had a fantastic season for the Lady Lakers. And then, you had the youngsters, Charlie Settle. She's incredibly talented. And Keely Puckett, she got so much better over the season. And I'm just so proud of all of those kids. And hopefully, now next year will be tough, because they lose 4 of their top 6 players in Allie Fritz, J.C. Spann, Alicia Hornbuckle, and Megan Greer. But hopefully they can have another great season next year. Now, the Callaway boys played Murray last night, and I did not like the way that the game started. It did not go their way at the beginning. They weren't making plays. They fell behind by 7 early, and
a big 7. It was a big 7-point lead. I mean, it felt insurmountable at times. Just the way things were going.
Because it was such a low-scoring game.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But Camden Price put on a show. Had a great game.
Yeah.
And he kind of put them on his shoulders, and the other kids stepped up, and Callaway pulled out a victory. I think they won by 10 points.
Yeah, the most misleading 10-point win I've ever seen, because it was a game that honestly, it felt like a coin flip
Now
for the middle third of the game. I mean, it was really tough.
Yeah.
It was a tough game to watch, but tip of the cap to those guys. Tip of the cap to Murray High for coming out and playing as well. They've got a lot of talent. That's a team, we talked about on the ladies' side, the three teams in the 4th District were as good as any in the 1st region. I think that's probably the same case can be said on the men's side. Maybe not the high-end number. I mean, you wouldn't put them with Graves County or with McCracken County at this point. But you look at what the Murray High boys did, they're a team that could absolutely do damage if they would have gotten into the 1st region tournament. They have the talent to do so. And I think that's the case as well with the Lakers. I think getting into the regional tournament, now it opens everything wide open. There's a chance for these Lakers to make a run. I mean, they've got the talent to do it. Things have to go their way, but...
Now, late in the game last night, Murray did not get the ball to Preston English, and that puzzled me, and I was glad.
Right.
Because he's really difficult to deal with.
He is.
But it puzzled me that they did not get the ball to him on like 2 or 3. I think it was at least 3 of the late possessions that they had. He did not get a meaningful touch.
Well, and the old saying is you dance with the one that brung you. I think last night you saw Callaway did and Murray did not.
And that brings to a close the sports section of the Improbability Engine.